The Friday night rush at Trattoria di Rossi was always chaos, but it was the kind of chaos Sofia Romano understood. Orders flew in from the kitchen. Waiters darted between tables. The clink of wine glasses and laughter mingled with the smell of garlic and simmering tomatoes. To most, the noise would be overwhelming. To Sofia, it was rhythm. She wove through the crowd carrying a tray of steaming pasta, the weight balanced on one hand, her movements instinctively avoiding elbows and chairs. At 26, she had perfected the art of appearing invisible. Efficient, polite, forgettable. That's what the job demanded. You didn't want patrons remembering the waitress. You wanted them remembering the food. But tonight, someone did notice her. Sofia's eyes caught on an older woman seated at a corner table, her brows furrowed as she stared helplessly at the menu. The woman's lips moved around uncertain English words, her hands fluttering with apology to the impatient waiter. Sofia slowed, her heart tugging. She recognized the struggle immediately, the look of someone stranded in a language not their own. She stepped forward, crouching beside the woman. "Non si preoccupi, signora," she said gently, switching without thought into the language of her childhood. "Don't worry, ma'am." The woman's entire face transformed, relief softening her wrinkles. Grazie ragazza mia," she whispered, her voice trembling with gratitude. Sofia smiled, warm and genuine. "What would you like?" "The gnocchi here is wonderful, or the osso buco, if you want something hearty." As she guided the woman through the menu, something shifted in the air. Sofia didn't notice it, but in the farthest corner booth, a man did. Matteo Duca lifted his head from a quiet conversation with his men. The words in Italian cut through the noise of the restaurant, sharp as a bell. It wasn't just the language. It was the way Sofia spoke it, fluid, melodic, untouched by years of disuse. For Matteo, it was like being pulled backward in time. He saw Sicily, the cliffs washed in gold at sunset, the sound of his mother's voice calling him in for dinner. He hadn't heard Italian spoken that tenderly in years. Not in this city, where his mother's memory had been buried under the weight of business, blood, and silence. Matteo's men continued their hushed talk of shipments and accounts, but he no longer heard them. His hazel eyes stayed fixed on the young woman crouching beside the elderly customer. She was ordinary at first glance. Dark hair tied back, simple uniform, tired but kind eyes. And yet, in the span of seconds, she had commanded his full attention. His lieutenant noticed the shift. "Boss," he asked, cautious. Matteo didn't look away. "Bring her to me," he murmured, his voice low but leaving no room for question. The order was simple, final, and just like that, Sofia's life was already veering off its safe, predictable path, though she couldn't possibly know it yet. The rest of the shift blurred for Sofia. She served wine. Cleared plates, forced polite smiles, but the weight of eyes on her back never left. She didn't know whose, exactly, but the sensation prickled like static along her skin. It wasn't until she slipped through the kitchen doors, to drop off another order, that a shadow stepped into her path. A tall man in a charcoal suit, broad shoulders filling the narrow hallway, blocked her without a word. His face was impassive, professional. "Mr. Duca would like to speak with you," he said. Sofia blinked. "I'm sorry. Who?" The man's gaze was unwavering. This way. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse. To tell him she had tables waiting, dishes to serve. But something in his tone made protest impossible. He wasn't asking. He was informing. Her legs carried her forward before her mind caught up. The dining room seemed to hush as he guided her toward the farthest corner booth. It was strange, but the laughter and clatter dimmed, replaced by the heavy awareness of where she was headed. A booth of men in tailored suits, their posture sharp, their conversation paused as she approached. At the center sat a man unlike the rest. Matteo Duca leaned back with the ease of someone accustomed to being the quiet center of gravity. His hazel eyes tracked her approach, steady, unhurried. His features were handsome but hard, carved by authority rather than vanity. The man beside her gestured. "Bus, this is the waitress." Sofia swallowed, setting her tray down. "Is something wrong with your service?" she asked, her voice firmer than she felt. A flicker, the ghost of amusement, touched Matteo's mouth. "On the contrary, I wanted to compliment it." Heat rose in her cheeks. She hadn't expected kindness, much less from someone who radiated danger so casually. She shifted on her feet. That's not usually why customers call for me. You spoke to that woman in Italian, Matteo said, his tone unreadable. Fluently. Sophia hesitated. My grandmother raised me with it. I just wanted to help her. Kindness, he murmured, almost to himself. A rare thing. And she frowned, unsure how to respond. There was weight behind the words, a gravity she didn't understand. He studied her like she was a puzzle, like her answer mattered more than it should have. Finally, Matteo slid something across the table. A black card, embossed only with his name and a single phone number. If you ever need anything, Miss Romano, he said, his voice low, deliberate, you call me. No matter the hour, no matter the reason. Sophia stared at the card. It might as well have been a live wire. Every instinct told her to leave it untouched, to step away. But curiosity, and something she couldn't name, made her pick it up, slipping it into her apron pocket. Thank you, she managed, though her throat felt tight. Matteo nodded once, dismissing her with the subtle authority of someone used to ending conversations. His men resumed their low talk. As Sophia walked away, her heart thudded in her chest. The card pressed against her ribs like a brand. She didn't know who Matteo Duca really was, not yet. But the way the room had shifted around him told her enough. She had just been noticed by someone who should never have noticed her. And nothing in her life would be the same again. Saturday evening fell heavy with rain. The streets outside Trattoria di Rossi gleamed under street lamps, puddles rippling as cars hissed past. Inside, the restaurant glowed warm, defiant against the storm. Sophia hadn't expected him back so soon. Yet when she rounded the corner with a tray of steaming cappuccinos, there he was again. Matteo Duca, seated with two men in dark suits. The sight pulled her pulse into her throat. He lifted his eyes to hers, and something like a faint smile tugged at his mouth. He gestured casually, and the other men leaned back, giving her space. You returned, Sophia said, setting down the espresso he had ordered. I said the coffee here was good, Matteo replied. His voice was even, but his gaze lingered as if he were searching her face for something he couldn't name. She hesitated, curiosity and caution twisting inside her. You come here often. Only when I expect good company, he said softly. The words caught her off guard. She busied herself with the saucer, willing her hands not to tremble. They spoke of small things at first, her grandmother, his Sicilian roots, and for a fleeting moment, the storm outside was a soundtrack to something fragile and human between them. Then his phone rang. Matteo's hand slid into his pocket, his expression shifting as soon as he heard the voice on the line. His jaw tightened, his eyes went cold. He barked something in Italian, sharp and clipped. Sophia couldn't understand, but the tension pouring off him was unmistakable. A second later, the world shattered. The front windows imploded inward with a deafening crack. Gunfire erupted, automatic and merciless. Screams tore through the dining room as patrons dove beneath tables, dishes crashing to the floor in a rain of porcelain. The rain had not stopped by the time the SUV pulled up the long drive. Sophia pressed her palm against the window, staring at the shadowed silhouette of the mansion as it emerged from the storm. Wrought iron gates opened onto a sweeping estate, the headlights carving a path through manicured gardens and statues that gleamed wet in the downpour. The house itself was vast, stone and glass rising like a fortress against the night. It was nothing like she expected. No warehouse, no seedy hideout, no cliché lair of criminals. This was elegance. Old money. A place where danger wore polished shoes and spoke in velvet tones. The SUV braked beneath the grand portico. Matteo was out first, umbrella snapping open in one hand as he circled to her side. He offered his other hand, steady, commanding, and she hesitated only a second before taking it. His palm was warm, his grip sure, guiding her across the rain, slicked stones and through heavy oak doors that swung open without a knock. Inside, the air smelled faintly of leather and cedar. Chandeliers glowed from vaulted ceilings, their light glinting off marble floors. Guards in dark suits lingered at the edges. Watchful but silent, Sophia stood dripping in her waitress uniform, her shoes squeaking against the tile. She felt impossibly out of place, as though she'd stepped into a dream, or a trap, Take her coat, Matteo ordered. A woman appeared from nowhere, slipping the wet fabric from Sophia's shoulders. Before she could protest, another man gestured toward a sitting room. She followed, her heart hammering, every nerve strung tight. The sitting room was vast but warm, a fire crackling in the hearth. Matteo motioned for her to sit. She perched on the edge of a leather armchair, stiff and uncertain. A moment later, another figure entered, older, sharp-eyed, carrying a medical bag. Dr. Moretti, Matteo said. She's injured. The doctor gave a small bow of his head and crossed to Sophia. May I? She nodded mutely. He knelt, carefully unwrapping the makeshift bandage Matteo had pressed to her arm. The cut was shallow but messy, flecked with tiny shards of glass. This will sting, the doctor murmured. Sophia flinched as antiseptic bit into the wound. Matteo remained standing close, his arms folded. Gaze locked on her as though daring her pain to show. She wondered if he always carried himself like that. As if every breath were a battle only he could win. When the doctor finished, bandaging the wound neatly, he gave Matteo a nod. She'll be fine. Some rest, perhaps. Thank you, Matteo replied. He pressed a thick envelope into the man's hand. Payment, she guessed. And the doctor left as quietly as he had come. Then it was only the two of them, the crackle of fire filling the silence. Sophia lifted her eyes to his. Why am I here? Matteo leaned against the mantel, studying her in the flickering light. For once, the mask of control slipped. Shadows carved the lines of his face, but his gaze was raw, unguarded. Because you were caught in something you shouldn't have been, he said softly. And because I put you there. Her throat tightened. Those men, they wanted to kill you. They've wanted that for a long time, Matteo admitted. Tonight, they decided to try. But it is not me I regret endangering. The weight in his tone pressed down on her chest. This was a man who had seen violence as a constant, yet in this moment he seemed burdened, almost ashamed. You saved me, she said quietly, surprising herself. His hazel eyes softened, just slightly. No, I protected you. Saving, that's different. The words lingered between them, heavy with meaning she didn't yet understand. For a long time, they said nothing. Sophia listened to the fire, the storm beyond the glass, the steady rhythm of her own heart. She felt exposed, but also strangely safe, as though the man before her was both a storm and a shelter. Finally, Matteo straightened, the mask sliding back into place. It's late. A room will be prepared for you upstairs. You'll stay here tonight. I can't, she began, panic rising. I have family. I have work. Your family will be safe, he interrupted. My men are already watching them. As for your work, a faint smile ghosted his lips. I think they will understand if you miss one shift. She shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't even know you. His gaze caught hers. Unyielding but almost pleading. You know enough. And with that, Matteo Duca turned and left the room, leaving her alone with the fire and the impossible weight of the night. Sophia froze, paralyzed by the chaos. Down, Matteo roared, before she could react. His arm closed around her waist and wrenched her off her feet. The two of them hit the floor behind the bar as shards of glass rained down. The smell of gunpowder filled the air sharp and choking. Matteo drew his pistol in one fluid motion and fired back over the counter. His men had already returned fire, their shouts in Italian cutting through the frenzy. The restaurant was a war zone. Overturned chairs, splintered wood, terrified sobs from huddled patrons. Sophia curled against the floor, heart hammering, ears ringing. She felt Matteo's body shielding hers, heavy and solid, every muscle braced. His coat brushed her cheek. She could feel the rapid rise and fall of his chest as he leaned out and shot again. Time fractured. She thought of her grandmother waiting for her tomorrow, of the bakery she always stopped at, of the simple life she had never thought extraordinary. Then the gunfire slowed, one shot, another, silence. Her ears buzzed in the aftermath. Somewhere, a child cried. A man whimpered in pain. Broken glass glittered like spilled diamonds across the floor. Matteo lowered his weapon. Scanning the room, one of his men gave a curt nod to clear. Only then did Matteo look down at her. Are you hurt? Sophia's breath came in sharp gasps. She lifted her arm. A shallow cut streaked across her forearm, blood mingling with glass dust. Matteo's hand was suddenly there, pressing a linen handkerchief against the wound. His grip was firm, his eyes unyielding. Hold it tight. She stared at him, unable to speak. He had shielded her with his own body, had fought like a man with nothing left to lose. And for the first time, she realized this wasn't a customer. This was someone dangerous, someone who carried violence with him like a second skin. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Matteo cursed under his breath, glancing at the shattered front. We can't stay here. Police will be swarming. And you. His eyes burned into hers. You're not safe anymore. Before Sofia could protest, his hand was on her elbow, pulling her to her feet. He guided her swiftly through the kitchen, past stunned chefs and cowering staff, out into the alley where a black SUV idled. Wait, my things, my shift, she tried, her voice breaking. No time, Matteo snapped, though his grip gentled. Get in. The storm's rain lashed at them, soaking her hair, plastering her uniform to her skin. A man opened the SUV door, and Matteo all but lifted her inside. The door slammed, and the city lights blurred as the car roared away. Sofia pressed back against the leather seat, trembling, staring at the man beside her. His pistol still rested across his lap, his jaw set like stone. She had no idea where he was taking her. But one truth chilled her to the bone. Her life had just crossed into a world she didn't understand, and there would be no going back. The morning light streamed pale and uncertain through silk curtains. Sofia woke in a bed too large, sheets too soft. The faint scent of sandalwood clinging to them. For a moment, she thought she dreamed it all. The gunfire, the mansion, the man with eyes like burning embers. Then the door opened. A maid entered, carrying a tray with steaming coffee and fresh bread. Compliments of Mr. Duca, she said softly, setting it down before vanishing again. Sofia sat up, heart twisting. This wasn't a dream. This was real. She forced herself to eat a little. Her stomach knotted with unease, before wandering downstairs. The mansion seemed impossibly vast, hallways lined with art and shadows, guarded men stationed at quiet intervals. It was beautiful, but it was also a cage. She found Matteo in the study. He was leaning over a heavy oak desk, men clustered around him. A map of the city spread out and dotted with red pins. His voice was low, deliberate, every word carrying the sharpness of command. When he noticed her, his tone softened. He dismissed the others with a flick of his hand. They left swiftly, leaving Sofia and Matteo alone in the cavernous room. You should be resting, he said. I can't rest when I don't understand, she replied, crossing her arms. Why were they shooting at you? Who are they? He hesitated, then walked to the window. Rain still streaked the glass, the gardens outside slick with storm water. For a moment, he looked almost fragile against the morning light. Ricardo, he said finally, the name like poison. An old rival. Once we worked together. Then he grew ambitious, reckless. He wanted everything for himself. When I refused, he turned his hand against me. Sofia's pulse quickened. And now he's trying to kill you? He will not stop there, Matteo said, his eyes dark. He'll strike anyone close to me. Anyone he can use. That includes you. The words sank like ice into her chest. Me. I don't even belong in your world. I'm just... You're not? Just anything? Matteo interrupted, his voice sharp. Then, quieter, almost pained. You were at my side when the bullets fell. That makes you a target. Sofia's breath caught. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if bracing against a chill. So what? I'm supposed to hide here while you fight your war. His jaw clenched. I will protect you. That is not up for debate. The authority in his tone left no room for argument, but it only stoked her fear. Protect her, against gunmen, against men like Ricardo. She didn't want protection. She wanted her life back, her grandmother, her routines. Matteo must have read the turmoil in her face. His expression softened, though his eyes still burned with steel. I did not choose for you to be caught in this. But now that you are, I will not allow him to touch you. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why me? And for a moment, Matteo didn't answer. He stepped closer, so close she could see the faint scar near his temple, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. His voice was low, almost a whisper. Because you remind me of the man I wanted to be, he admitted. The confession unsettled her more than anger would have. She looked away, unable to bear the intensity in his gaze. Before either could say more, the study door burst open. Luca, the broad-shouldered man who had returned her phone days before, entered, his face grim. "Boss," Luca said, his tone urgent. Riccardo's men were spotted near the Romano bakery. "He's probing, looking for leverage." Sofia froze. "My grandmother." Matteo was already moving, snapping orders. "Send 2 cars. Double the guard. If Riccardo thinks he can touch her family, he is mistaken." He turned back to Sofia, his expression deadly calm. "This is what I meant. He'll come for what matters most to you. That's why you cannot leave my side." Her legs trembled beneath her. Her grandmother's face flashed in her mind. Sweet, wrinkled, waiting with a plate of biscotti on Saturdays. And now that gentlewoman was in the crosshairs of a man she had never even met. Sofia pressed a hand to her mouth, fighting tears. Her safe, small life was unraveling thread by thread, and all because she had spoken 3 words in Italian to a stranger. Night fell heavy, smothering the estate in silence. The mansion's windows glowed faintly against the dark, each one watched by guards who prowled the grounds with radios clipped to their belts. Sofia stood at the balcony outside her guest room, staring into the gardens below. The air smelled of rain-soaked earth, but instead of peace it carried the metallic tang of dread. She should have been at her grandmother's house by now, helping knead dough for tomorrow's bread, listening to old Italian songs on the radio. Instead, she was here, in a fortress masquerading as a home, waiting for something she couldn't name, but could feel creeping closer with every tick of the clock. Behind her, the door creaked open. "You're awake." Matteo's voice carried softly across the room. She turned. He was in shirt sleeves, no jacket, a glass of scotch in his hand. Even without the suit, he looked untouchable, every line of his body taut with unspoken command. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Neither could I." He stepped beside her, looking out over the rain-drenched gardens. For a moment, the silence stretched. Then he said quietly, "I've done many things that deserve hatred. But if Riccardo dares touch your family, I will burn him from the earth." The vow was not boast, not threat. It was simply truth. And it terrified her as much as it steadied her. Sofia parted her lips to speak. But the night exploded. The first blast ripped through the far gates, a fireball tearing into the sky. Sirens wailed as men shouted. Gunfire cracked in sharp bursts, echoing across the grounds. Matteo's glass hit the floor and shattered. In one motion, he seized her wrist. Inside. "Now." She stumbled after him as alarms blared. Guards sprinted past the windows, returning fire into the shadows. The estate shuddered with impact as another explosion lit the gardens in orange flame. "Riccardo," Matteo snarled, dragging her down the staircase. "Is here." The front doors buckled under the impact of bullets. Shouts in Italian rose as intruders stormed through the smoke. The foyer filled with chaos. Muzzle flashes, the acrid stench of gunpowder, the crash of glass. Matteo shoved Sofia behind a marble pillar. "Stay down," he ordered, drawing his pistol. "Wait, what about you?" she gasped. His eyes burned, wild but controlled. "I'll be where I always am." In the middle of it, he disappeared into the storm of violence before she could stop him. Sofia crouched low, covering her ears as the battle raged. She saw Luca tackling a gunman to the ground, heard the sharp crack of bones. Another guard fell, blood spraying across the polished marble. The world was chaos, fire and screams blending into something nightmarish. Then a hand clamped over her mouth. She twisted, muffled, eyes wide, and found herself staring into the cold grin of a man she didn't know, one of Riccardo's soldiers. His pistol pressed against her ribs. "Got the girl," he hissed into his radio. Sofia's heart stopped. The girl, they had come for her. Before she could react, a shot thundered. The man's head snapped back, and he collapsed at her feet. Smoke curled from the barrel of Matteo's gun. He caught her arm, pulling her close. His chest heaved. His shirt streaked with blood. "Not his," she prayed. "He's coming for you. We end this tonight, but you're hurt." "No." His grip tightened, his voice low and fierce. "I'm alive. That's enough." Riccardo's men were retreating, but not in defeat, in strategy. The fires outside painted the night in violent hues, and Matteo knew this was only the beginning. As silence fell in fragments, Sofia clung to him, her entire body trembling. She understood now this wasn't random violence. This wasn't just a feud. She was no longer a bystander. She was the weapon Ricardo meant to use against Matteo. And Matteo would burn down the world before letting that happen. The night after the attack, the city felt like a wound left open. Matteo didn't sleep. He moved like a storm through the mansion, his men scrambling to answer his clipped commands. Maps spread across tables, radios buzzing with intercepted chatter. Every move of Ricardo's men was tracked, pinned, narrowed until only one truth remained: the enemy was cornered. At dawn, Luca brought confirmation. Warehouse by the docks. Heavy presence. Ricardo's in there. Matteo's jaw clenched. Then we end this tonight. Sofia listened from the doorway, her stomach twisting. The words were spoken like a death sentence, and she didn't know if it would be Ricardo's or Matteo's. You can't go, she whispered when they were alone. This is a trap. He stepped closer, eyes burning with determination. It's always a trap, but this ends now. I won't let him come for you again. Her throat closed. She wanted to argue, but the steel in his voice made it useless. So instead, she followed, against her better judgment, against every instinct. Because some part of her knew if she stayed behind, she'd never forgive herself. The warehouse loomed at the docks, its rusted steel doors yawning open to shadows. Rain slicked the ground, reflecting the jitter of neon signs and the sweep of headlights. Inside, the space reeked of oil and dust. Stacks of crates rose like walls, corridors of rusted scaffolding winding between them. The air was heavy, charged. And then Ricardo appeared. He stepped from the shadows with a smirk carved into his scarred face. His men fanned out behind him. Matteo Duca, he drawled, his voice echoing. Still pretending you can be the hero. Matteo raised his gun, unwavering. This ends here, Ricardo. Ricardo's laughter was sharp, cruel. You brought the girl. Too. How generous of you. Saves me the trouble of fetching her. His eyes slid to Sofia, hungry with malice. She's prettier up close. Sofia's blood ran cold. Matteo's arm shifted instinctively, shielding her. The standoff broke in an instant. Gunfire roared, deafening inside the metal shell of the warehouse. Sparks lit the air as bullets struck steel. Men shouted in Italian, bodies lunged, fell. The smell of cordite choked the air. Matteo moved like a predator, precise, lethal. Every shot deliberate. But Ricardo was no fool. He pressed forward, his men swarming, forcing Matteo into cover. Sofia ducked behind a crate, hands trembling as splinters flew around her. She could hear Matteo grunting, fighting hand to hand now, the clash of fists and the scrape of boots on concrete. Then, silence. She peeked around the corner. Matteo and Ricardo were locked in brutal combat, guns knocked away, knives flashing. Matteo's blade slashed across Ricardo's arm. Ricardo countered with a savage punch that sent Matteo staggering. Sofia's heart hammered. She saw a pistol skitter across the floor, stopping inches from her. Her breath caught. Her hand moved before her mind could. She scooped up the gun, her fingers shaking violently. Ricardo was raising his knife, Matteo pinned against the crates, struggling to push him back. Sofia's voice broke the chaos. Stop. Her both men froze. Her hands were unsteady, but the gun was leveled, her finger curled around the trigger. She was trembling. Terrified, but her eyes didn't waver. Ricardo, she said, her voice raw but strong, if you touch him again, I swear I'll kill you. For the first time, Ricardo hesitated. He sneered, blood dripping down his chin. The waitress thinks she's a killer now. The tension snapped. He lunged. The shot rang out like thunder. Ricardo stumbled, shock flashing across his face before blood bloomed across his chest. He crumpled to the concrete, his knife clattering beside him. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the ragged sound of Matteo's breathing. He looked at Sofia, the pistol still smoking in her hands, her face pale, her body trembling as if every nerve had caught fire. She dropped the gun with a clatter. Tears streaked her cheeks. I didn't mean. Matteo crossed to her, pulling her into his arms with a force that nearly crushed her. You saved me, he said, voice rough with awe. You saved us both. Around them, Ricardo's men fled or fell. Luca and the others secured the scene, radios crackling with victory. But in the center of the wreckage, there was only Matteo and Sofia. Clinging to each other amid the ruin, their hearts pounding in sync, the war between them and death momentarily won. The warehouse stank of smoke and blood. Ricardo's body lay sprawled across the concrete, his eyes wide with shock, the knife glinting useless beside him. Around him, the chaos ebbed, Matteo's men gathering weapons, dragging the wounded, sealing the exit. The storm outside had softened to a drizzle, the sound of raindrops echoing through broken windows like a requiem. Sofia stood in the center of it all, trembling. The pistol she had fired moments ago still lay at her feet, its presence unbearable. Her breath came in shallow bursts. She had never fired a gun in her life. And now she couldn't stop replaying the moment Ricardo lunged, the recoil kicking against her hand, the crimson bloom on his chest. Her knees buckled. Matteo caught her before she hit the ground. "Breathe," he urged, his voice low but urgent, as if his will alone could steady her. He pressed her against his chest, his heart hammering against her ear. "It's over, Sofia. It's over." The tears slipped down her cheeks. "I killed him." Matteo tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. They burned, but not with judgment, with gratitude. With awe. "No," he said firmly. "You saved me. You saved yourself. That's not the same thing." Around them, Luca approached. "Boss. Police scanners are alive. We don't have long." Matteo nodded once, still holding Sofia as though she were the only solid thing in the world. Then he turned to Luca. "Make it clean. Leave nothing that ties her to this." Sofia stiffened. "What do you mean?" "You were never here," Matteo said, cutting her off. "You didn't fire that gun. You didn't touch this life. Understand?" She opened her mouth to argue, but the fierce protectiveness in his tone silenced her. He wasn't asking. He was carving a path out of the fire for her, even if it meant taking the flames himself. They slipped into the rain-drenched night before the sirens arrived. The car ride was quiet, broken only by Sofia's uneven breathing and the rhythmic hum of the engine. Matteo kept her hand in his thumb brushing her knuckles as though anchoring her back to earth. When they finally returned to the mansion, dawn was breaking. The first light of day painted the sky pink and gold, a stark contrast to the darkness they had left behind. Inside, a fire already crackled in the hearth. Matteo led her to it, lowering himself beside her on the rug. The warmth kissed their damp skin, the flicker of flame dancing in their eyes. Sofia turned to him, voice barely more than a whisper. "What happens now?" Matteo exhaled, long and tired. "Now I change. No more vendettas. No more blood. Ricardo's death ends it. I owe you that much. I owe myself that much." She searched his face, looking for cracks in his promise. But what she saw instead was a man stripped bare. No mask. No armor. Just Matteo, wary, haunted, but determined. "You can't undo what you've been," Sofia said softly. "No," he admitted, reaching for her hand. "But I can decide what I'll be tomorrow." The firelight painted him in gold. For the first time, she let herself believe it. Her head found his shoulder, his arm wrapping around her. Together they sat in silence, listening to the crackle of flames, the storm's last drops against the windows. And though the night had been filled with gunfire and death, the morning brought something else. A fragile promise of redemption, and the first breath of a future they might dare to build together. 2 years later, the Sicilian coast stretched endless and golden, the waves rolling in soft against the shore. Whitewashed houses dotted the hills, their terracotta roofs glowing in the late afternoon sun. From a distance, the village bakery was unremarkable, just another stone building on a narrow street, its windows fogged with warmth. But inside, the air was alive with the scent of fresh bread, espresso, and laughter. Sofia moved easily behind the counter, flour dusting her apron, her dark hair tied in a loose knot. Customers greeted her by name. Children pressed their noses to the glass to eye the biscotti. This was the life she had dreamed of once, a simple, rooted, full of small joys. But it was more than she ever imagined, because she wasn't living it alone. In the back room, Matteo's deep laugh carried as he lifted their toddler son into the air, the boy squealing with delight. The sight never failed to undo her. The man who had once commanded fear now reduced to gentle fatherhood. his hands steady not on weapons, but on the fragile body of a child who trusted him completely. He caught Sophia's gaze across the room, his smile softening. For a heartbeat, everything else fell away. They had survived the fire. They had chosen each other, and they had built something new from the ashes. Later that evening, after the shop closed, they walked together along the coastline. The sea breeze tangled in Sophia's hair, the child asleep in Matteo's arms. The horizon glowed with twilight, and the village lights flickered behind them like stars. "You ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Walking away from that life?" Matteo was silent for a long moment, eyes on the waves. Then he shook his head. "No, that life was built on blood. This," he glanced at her, then at their son, "this is built on love. And love wins." Sophia leaned into him, her hand brushing his. The words sank deep, filling the hollow places that once held only fear. They stood together on the cliffside, watching the sea roll into night, and for the first time since fate had thrown them together in a restaurant years ago. There was no weight of danger pressing between them, only the sound of the ocean, the warmth of family, and the unshakable truth that their story, born in violence, tempered in fire, had found its ending not in death but in life.